The CleanUp Clutch by Linds Handmade. It's a great beginner-friendly project that you can give as a present, and it's just very easy to make. You can use your domestic sewing machine for this project. The only thing I think it's the pocket section can get a little bit thick, but it's nothing that your domestic machine cannot handle. And the little wristlet, it is super cute and it makes it so easy to carry. So let's go ahead and make this beautiful cleanup clutch. The following materials are also needed, which is a zipper with a zipper pull. You will need a removable marking pen, a seam ripper, small pair of scissors, and a small quilting ruler, a rotary cutter if you want to cut your fabric with this. You definitely will need that. You also will need magnetic snaps, and you can use the standard magnetic snaps like these with the prongs. And you definitely will need the seam ripper to kind of cut the fabric a little bit to insert the prongs. But I am going to use for this project the magnetic rivets. So I'm going to use my cam snap for that. And I have the rivets for the magnetic snaps. And also optional, it says you can add a couple of rivets to your clutch. So I'm going to add 6mm rivets, and these are the dies for the cam snap. If you add rivets, you will need some sort of hole punch for your fabric. So I'm using my hole punch dies from my cam snap as well. Another thing is you may need double-sided tape. It's always good to have handy, or fabric glue. Again, always nice to have available. You will need wonder clips or any other clips. Sometimes I use paper clips as well as hair clips. And some of the other tools that you will need besides the ruler and the rotary cutter and the marking pens. I also used my scissors a lot, and I used this little tool. It's actually for clay making. I've never done clay, but I sew it and it has this round edge, and it's very good to get the corners out. A seam gauge for your sewing machine. This is great for sewing too, when you're sewing, to keep the fabric in place. And small scissors, and you can an iron board or this wool pad, and a hot iron. Here it is, laminated cotton. So this is plastic. This is Decoville, Decor Bond 809, and the shiny side goes down. Because of the plastic, I'm gonna press it this way, but I'm going to put like a cloth on top of it, cheesecloth, and I'm just gonna press it. It's at 334. Let's see what happens. Okay. Who's hot? Okay, look, it's good in there. Look. And it's getting, as it cools down, it gets stiffer. Definitely works perfectly fine. So if you feel like you need to, if you have some laminated cotton fabric and you need to interface it, you can. Okay, let's start with the cut list. So first you're going to have your main body, and for that you have your exterior fabric and your lining fabric. The interfacing for this, you will use woven interfacing for both the lining and the exterior, and then on the exterior you're going to also interface fusible fleece. Next you have your flaps, and you will cut two, one with your lining fabric and one with your exterior fabric. Also, you will cut two woven interfacings. This is all depending on your fabric. I'm using quilting cotton for most of it, or for all of it, so that's why I'm using woven interfacing. However, I forgot to cut the woven interfacing for this piece, for the flap, and I didn't add it. So what I did is that you're supposed to add woven interfacing, and then on your lining side of your flap, you would do either Decoville Light or the Core Bond 809, which is what I use, the Core Bond. And then on your exterior flap, you will also, on top of the woven interfacing, will fuse fusible fleece. Next, you have your pockets, and it's 6 different pockets that you need. You have your exterior fabric. For the exterior, you only need to use woven interfacing. Then you have your lining, and as you can see, I'm not using the same fabric as the regular lining. I decided to cut a little piece of the laminated cotton, and I added the Core Bond 809. And then for the other pockets, you can use either an accent fabric or a liner fabric. And I just ran out of the other fabric, and I had this laminated fabric and it kind of matched. So I decided to cut 4 more pieces of this fabric for the pockets, and all of these have woven interfacing only. Okay, then you have your slip pockets, and for this you will cut them using your main or exterior fabric, and you will do 2 Decoville Lights or the Core Bond 809. No woven interfacing. Then you have your wristlet strap, and you will cut an exterior fabric, a lining fabric, and they're both with woven interfacing. Again, I'm only using cotton, so that's why I'm using woven interfacing. And these are my zipper tabs. And finally, here's my changing pad. For the changing pad, I am using a lining fabric and a laminated cotton fabric. Neither one of them have any interfacing. So no woven interfacing, Decoville Light, nothing. Just your fabric. We're going to start by putting together the changing pad. And for that, you're going to take your 2 pieces of fabric for the lining pad with the right sides together. And you're going to join them. I use Wonder clips to keep them together. I noticed that one of my sides was a little shorter, so this is going to be about a 1/4 inch smaller. So I'm going, when I take it to the sewing machine to stitch it, I'm going to stitch it on this side. That way I can follow the seam allowance based on the shorter piece of fabric. Let's go ahead and pin it in place. And what you're going to do, take it to the sewing machine and sew it at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you're going to leave an opening here of about 4 to 5 inches. because this is where you're going to, turn the changing pad to the right side. So go around the corners and start and back stitch at the beginning and end of the opening that you're going to leave there. Now we're going to trim the seam allowance by half, so a 1/4 inch, and we're going to notch the curves here. So, but we're going to start and stop the trimming of the seam allowance here at the opening. Okay, we're not going to trim that side. Okay, so now you're going to insert your hand through that opening, and we're going to turn this right side out. I would suggest, if you're having a hard time turning this right side out, maybe do 5 inches instead of 4. I feel like 4 inches was kind of tight. Now you're going to finger press it here, push it with your fingers, push all the corners out with your fingers. That way all the seams are stretched out, okay? And if you are using regular quilting cotton in one of these sides of either the, whichever side it is, go ahead and take your iron and give it a good press right now. When you press it, choose the side that is only the quilting cotton and not the laminated cotton, because you don't want to melt your lamination. I have both sides of this changing pad with lamination. Actually, one side came with the fabric that I purchased, and the other side I laminated it myself. I used some fusible vinyl and made it waterproof. If you want to learn how to do that, check out this video right here. However, since I did that, I am not going to press the changing pad. What I'm going to do though is make sure that I get the seam out as much as possible, like right there, like that. And I am going to put like a couple of clips here and there to help it. So I make sure I push all my fabric out as much as I can. So after you do that, you're going to take this to the sewing machine. Now the bottom here, the opening, you're going to push in towards the inside of the changing pad. Okay, like that. And just put a couple of clips there. Take it to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all around, and you're going to stitch over the opening, and then you're going to stitch it again and doing another row of stitching at 1/8 of an inch from the first stitching, from the first stitch line. Here's the finished stitching. Now to finish up the changing pad, you're going to fold this in half lengthwise. So looking at the laminated side, you're going to fold it lengthwise and make sure that it is even. And then you're going to fold it in threes. Okay, you're gonna fold it in like that, and then put a book or something heavy on it and let it sit there until it's time to use it when we finish the cleanup clutch. To make the wristlet, we need to get our 2 pieces of fabric, the exterior and the lining. You're going to need a hot iron, and I use heavy starch. This is optional, but highly recommended. I spray my fabric first with the wrong side facing you. We're going to fold the strip of fabric in half, marking the center of the strip of fabric. So we're making a crease down the center, and then we're going to take the long edge and fold that, matching the center crease here. One, see, it doesn't move, stays in place. And we're going to do the same with the second, or the exterior. So now with the wrong side of your exterior, which is the side that has the raw edges, you're going to take the lining side of the strip of fabric, the lining fabric, and you're going to also, with the wrong side facing down, place it on top of the exterior. And you're going to see a little bit of the exterior fabric outer edge because it is a little bit wider, and that's okay. It's going to look just like that. So now we're going to take some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to place some of that along the edge here where the raw edge is, because we want to join the 2 strips of fabric together before we stitch them. Carefully place your lining piece over the raw edges of the exterior piece, and they covered each other. Okay, now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on both edges right here along the lining side, or the shorter side, joining both pieces together. Then we're going to fold it and stitch it here together at 1/4 inch seam allowance, making a loop. Consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel if you have learned something today. The next step includes adding the magnetic snaps to the flap and the main body. The pattern designer used the standard magnetic snaps, the ones with the prongs. If you're using that style of magnetic snaps, at this point you are going to install them. So you're going to take your flap piece, the lining side, and you're going to place the markings on the wrong side of the lining of your flap. You can use the pattern that she provides because it has a drawing here with the placement, or you can follow the instructions from her pattern. It tells you the measurements of where to place the snaps, the magnetic snaps. Now, you will do that now, and on the lining side of your flap, you will place the male magnetic snaps. Then on the exterior main body, you are going to find the bottom piece of your main body, and you're going to take also the pattern PDF file, and you're going to place the marking there or follow the measurements that are listed in the pattern. I am not using the standard magnetic snaps. I'm using the rivet ones. And so the process is going to be a little bit different for me because the rivet magnetic snaps have the look of a rivet on the outside. So on my exterior flap, I will be able to see the two little rivets here where the magnetic snaps are placed. So in order to do that, I will have to make my flap first and then add the magnetic snaps after the flap is finished. So that is not a problem. I can do that. However, I want to place the markings now because after I sew it and I take my seam allowance and I turn it right side out and all of that, my pattern is not going to match with the final measurements of my flap, right? So what I am going to do is I'm going to mark the placement for my magnetic snaps on the exterior, on the lining side, but on the right side of the fabric instead of the wrong side. So after I do that, I am going to sew it together, right sides together, stitch it, turn it right side out, and then my markings are going to show on the outside of the flap. Now, for the main body, she says to mark the placement of the magnetic snaps at the bottom of your main body. And so because my fabric is directional, I want to make sure that when it's closed, it looks the way I want it to look. So if I do it like this and I close it, my little and this is where it's going to be, like the snaps are going to be here. I don't want that. I don't want my rainbows to be upside down. So I have to flip it, and if I close it like this and close it, now my rainbows are in the right direction. That means this is my bottom. So I'm just going to take a little pen and I'm just going to type the letter B here. So let's go ahead. I don't want to add the snaps to the main body yet until I have the flap ready. So I'm going to make the flap and then add the snaps. Okay, so I have my lining and my exterior right sides together, and I am going to mark about 4 inches here for the opening where I'm not, and actually the pattern has the markings here, so that works. We just need to make sure that the edges are all aligned together. Okay, You're going to start here, 1/2 inch seam allowance, go around and stop here. So 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to trim the seam allowance by half without trimming the opening area, only where the stitching is. So I'm going to start here like this and then do half. Now when I get to this corner, the little corners, I like to trim the little corners, cut the little ear off. Okay. And around the curves, you're going to snip a couple of notches, or more than a couple, right? More than a couple. I just noticed something, a mistake I made. Okay, so I just noticed that I did not place the markings for the snaps on the outside of the lining as I said I was going to. So what I'm going to do, good thing was that I marked the placement of the snaps on my flap before I trimmed off the seam allowance. So please do as I say, not as I do. So what I'm going to do to avoid additional mistakes. Oh my gosh, talk about being real in these videos, huh? Okay, I am going to hole punch right here at the markings, in that it will go through all the layers before I turn it right side out. That way I know for a fact this is where I'm going to place my snaps. So there are my 2 little holes, okay, on all 4, on all 2 layers, so that I can place my magnetic rivets. Okay, and you're going to use your fingers to kind of finger push your seam out, okay, around the corners and around the curve. I have this tool. It's really like a clay tool. It's to do clay, even though I've never done clay. But I saw it one time and I was like, oh, that's perfect, because I can push out the corners and it's round, so it won't poke right through the fabric, you know, creating a hole, and it actually pushes the corners out. So pretty handy. Another thing, I take some fray check and I like to put a little bit of fray check on the areas that I cut the hole. Even though there's interfacing in there and all of that, I like to be better safe than sorry. Here it is. Now take the opening side and push the fabric in, and you can, if you have a hot iron, press this. I think I'm going to do that just to give it a nice press to make sure it's flat. And I can do it because none of these sides have any of the laminated fabric or any vinyl. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and the way she says to stitch it is that you're only going to stitch on the sides and around here and the bottom, not the top. You're not going to stitch the top. And we're going to have 2 lines of stitching, kind of like what we did in the changing pad. You're going to start, the first line of stitching is 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. The second line of stitching is 1/8 of an inch away from that first line of stitching. So pretty much 1/8 and 1/4. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add the magnetic rivets. I already have the holes punched on the flap. We are going to take our main body pattern, or you can follow the measurements from the instructions that she gives us, and place the marking. Remember, on the bottom side of your main body. So bottom, and I already placed the markings right there. I have a video how to add magnetic snap rivets, so you can go ahead and watch that video. I am just going to place these real quick, and then we can continue with finishing the cleanup clutch. The next step in this process is to join the flap to the main body after you've added your magnetic snaps or magnetic rivet snaps. Now, as you can see, I already kind of placed it here, and I want to show you what I did. The first thing you're going to do is that you're going to measure from the edge of your main body, the opposite side from where the magnetic snaps are. You're going to measure 1 1/4 inch, and you're going to mark it. So I used my chalk here, and I used I used my ruler, and I marked 1 1/4, and I did a line. Okay, then you're going to place the edge of the top edge of your flap along that line. And if you have double-sided tape, you can place some double-sided tape in there, and it will stay, to keep the flap in place. Or you can use a couple of pins like I did here. But when I was placing the flap here, I wanted to make sure that my snaps closed, that when I close this, it will work. So what I did is that I pinned it. I put the pins, it's in there, then I closed it like if I was going to close it, like if it's done, finished, right? Okay, and there it is. At this point, if you need to move this around, I had to actually push this a little up because it was kind of looking a little crooked, but not so much that, it was completely, out of shape, or like, you want it to be even. You see how it's even here, and you don't want your flap to look absolutely like this. You want it to look straight. So what I suggest is that you close it. The snaps are together, and then you take your flap and you measure it along that line, and making sure that it looks straight, that it looks good. This is an important step, I think, in this process, because you don't want to finish this, close it, and then find out that it is crooked. This is how it's going to look when you close it, and you just need to be careful that it looks the way you want it to look. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along the straight edge here of the flap using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you're going to do the second row. You're going to repeat the second row of stitching at 1/4 of an inch away from the first row. Okay, so same as you did along the edges. Okay. And then we can put this aside. So here it is. You can see here my 2 lines of stitching. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to place a rivet in this corner, in this corner. This is completely optional, but I just like the look. But you don't have to. You can just have your lines of stitching there. We're going to add the tabs to the zipper here, and you're going to stitch it at 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. And then after you do that, you're going to flip it open like this, and you're going to stitch it at top stitch it at 1/8 inch seam allowance over here. Put that aside. Now we're going to take our pocket lining. This is the one that has the Decoville Light or the Core Bond 809. Okay, and you're going to take also your 2 wipes pockets. You're going to fold them in half. There is a square, so they're the same size no matter which end. So you can either fold them this way or this way. I'm just gonna fold them like this so that my rainbows are straight. And we're going to do the stitching like the border that we've been doing all along. The 2 lines of stitching, one at 1/8 inch seam allowance, the other one at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And after you complete this, you're going to place it over your pocket lining, matching all the raw edges on each corner like that. Baste them in place. That's a 4mm stitch length. Okay, so now you're going to take another one of the pocket pieces here. This is one of the accent pocket pieces, and you're going to lay it on top of this wipes pocket that we're making. Okay, right sides together, and we are going to only stitch the top part. You're going to stitch it at 3/8 inch seam allowance. And this is how it looks. Now I noticed that there's a little bit of fabric left over here, and she mentions that in her video, so I'm going to trim that off. And it's recommended that you do this because when it's time, I guess, to put the pocket together, you don't want to have any excess fabric making it difficult to align the edges or anything like that. So now you're going to get the other pocket pieces. So you should have the main fabric and 3 accent fabric pieces. Okay, and you're going to take your zipper that we made, and with the zipper pull facing down, you're going to match the right sides together. And I make sure the zipper pull is facing to the left because when you open it, that's how you're gonna open from left to right. So we're going to match all the raw edges here to join the zipper to the zipper pocket panel. Now you're going to take one of the accent pieces, will be like the liner. So this will be the front of the zipper pocket and this is the back, the line. So you're gonna put the right side facing down against the wrong side of the zipper, matching of course all the raw edges. We're going to stitch this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you can go ahead and open it now. If you want to press it, you can on the side that doesn't have any lamination. Then you're going to take another piece of your pocket and place it on right sides together with a zipper. You can baste it now if you want to, so make sure that it stays in place, and then take the other piece and then you're going to right sides together, put it against the wrong side of the zipper. Go ahead and take it to the sewing machine and stitch it at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you do that, you're going to open it up like this. Okay, you're gonna have your zipper there and you're going to top stitch it on each side. Kind of close it down, right? It looks close. You make sure that all the raw edges lined up. You're going to take your clips here, your wonder clips, and you're going to align them together. This is the exterior. You're gonna leave it like that. I know it looks good. Anyway, okay, perfect. So now that we have our zipper pocket done and our wipes pocket done, we're going to take our lining main body. You're gonna mark either top or bottom, whichever side you want, and if you have a directional fabric, you will mark your top or your bottom. So I'm just gonna mark this as my bottom. So with the lining side facing you, I'm going to take the wipes slip pocket and I'm going to place it along the bottom edge right here, making sure it lines up on the sides. Now make sure that the side that is stitched with the edge, it's facing away from you or it's facing towards the center of the lining piece. I'm only putting this temporary, only 3 clips for now. You're gonna take the zipper pouch and you're going to lay it along the top edge here of your lining main body, and the zipper will be facing towards the center of your main body piece here. And you're going to also clip this in place. You should have a gap here, she says, of about 1.5 inches. And yep, I'm a little short, but it's because my zipper tape is kind of long. But yeah, there's at least, there's enough space in there. Perfect. Now we're going to flip it, and as you can see, I want to make sure, see how this doesn't line up. We want to make sure everything lines up. So I'm just going to, and this is very important because as you can see, this has round edges, right? The lining piece, but my pocket and my wipes slip pocket doesn't have round edges. So we're going to round them up now. And so we need to make sure that everything lines up perfectly in order to round these off. And you can do this, or you can, this way, or you can also just grab your pattern piece and mark, the round edges there. So I'm just going to carefully round that off. And again, if you find it easier to get your pattern pieces and do it that way, then that's best. It may be easier to do it like that with the pocket pieces because you have 4 layers of fabric. So let me go ahead and grab the pattern. So after you use your pattern piece, if you prefer, and round the 4 edges to match the main body lining part, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to baste stitch it around the edges here to join both pockets. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. If you made the wristlet strap and you want to join it to the body here of your CleanUp clutch, you will have to choose whether you carry it on the right hand or on the left hand. So it's 1 1/4 inch down from the top edge, and I'm just going to put the wristlet there and just leave some of it sticking out. It's always good not to put it right on the edge, because you're going to be using this side of the, you're going to be using the wristlet a lot, so you don't want it to eventually come off. And when you're stitching it, make sure you do like a couple of stitching, like a couple of lines, and reinforce this area a lot. Okay, so now let's finish putting both pieces together. So I decided to go ahead and stitch this in place to remove the clips, because now we're going to join both main pieces, the exterior and the lining, and the whole body here that we've done. With the zipper pocket facing away from you and the slip pocket towards you, you're going to take your exterior main panel, and with the magnetic sides facing down, where on the same side where your slip wipes pocket is. Okay, so make sure that you see that your magnetic snap is in there, and this is where your wipes are going to be, that pocket. You're going to, of course, line up all your edges on the bottom and on the sides. Pin everything in place, making sure you line up all the sides and the bottom edge, okay, and the rounds. Once you get to this point, you're going to start stitching along on one side, go around the bottom and go up, and you're going to leave the flap out like this. And what you're going to do is, she recommends that you get your zipper foot, which makes sense, so you can get really close here to this edge, because you're going to start stitching right there at the edge of the flap. And she recommends that you actually start stitching at 1/2 inch down from the edge, and you're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So starting right there, go all around, and you're going to stop there. do what we can. Okay, so now we're going to turn the flap inside, and she says in her instructions to leave a good opening here to turn this right side out, right? So I don't know, 4 inches, sometimes it's just not big enough for my hands, I guess. I'm gonna do 5 inches. So I'm gonna do from here to here. I just want to have enough space here. So there you go. Now we're going to stitch it here around the corner, back stitch, around the corner, back stitch. And then we're going to trim it half, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch, so half the seam allowance, and snip the corners here with some notches. So now we're going to turn this right side out, and we start with trying to pull, you know, the back, the bottom edge, I mean the bottom of the clutch all the way. Maybe not. Okay, this could be tricky. Let me see, maybe I should try by pulling the flap first. So birthing this may be a little tricky. Okay, let's see, let's get the corners. So I started with a flap, and then the top corners, the top round corners, and then just keep working the back through that hole. Keep birthing it. Okay, it's coming through. Okay. And of course now I'm using, you know, my fingers to poke the corners out at the bottom. As much as I can, so it looks round. And here and here. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so now we're just going to clip this in place, fold it in the opening. You can hand stitch it and close it that way, or you can just run it through the sewing machine, which I think I'm going to do that. It's very thick. This is very thick. It's a lot of layers here, and I don't want to stitch it and then my edges start coming off. You know, I wanted to fold it in enough where my edges are not going to start coming apart. And I'm just going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch right there to close the hole. And here it is, the final CleanUp clutch. Look how beautiful it is. You can close it, and the snaps are right there, and it has the little wristlet strap, and you can you have the changing pad that will go in there. I think it's either there or here that it fits. I think it's in. And remember that if you want to learn how to make your fabric waterproof, like I did the lining for this, because this lining is not waterproof, but this one is, check out the next video that I have here where I show you how to waterproof your fabric. Ciao.